Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to my channel, Draw Too Much. My name is Tim Lee, and today it's time to do another critique video of one of my Patreon students. I have a Patreon account, and I actually host my classes there that we do once a month. And what happens is you get registered at $10 a month. You just got to support one video at $10 a month, and then you come and join us on Discord. And Discord is absolutely awesome because my students are constantly practicing uploading their images there, talking to each other, giving advice, getting advice, and more importantly, supporting each other and telling each other great job. And it's a wonderful little community that we've started with, I think, 4 students right now, and I'm just incredibly proud of what they've created and what they are creating when I'm not there doing it. So today I want to show you this critique, but I'm going to start by showing you the drawing that I did during our class. Okay, so as you can tell, Mark Zuckerberg, and you can see my version of Mark Zuckerberg that I drew during the class to demonstrate how to kind of lock down likeness a little bit, what things to look at. Some of our students were new. We had 2 new students in our class. We had CraneKick, is what we call him, and then we also had Beluga Tunes, and both of them are exceptional artists in their own right. They both are skilled at many different sides of things. One of the things that I got to help them focus on is likeness. And so what I want to show you, I just wanted to show you my drawing to kind of kick it off, just to give you a little bit of a feeling of kind of the route that I was going with the drawing, why I chose to go the route that I went, and then pay attention to some of the details, the exaggerations, and the proportions, and then we're going to move on and show you some of his images. Let's go ahead and start with this one. And let me zoom in on it here. So one of the things that I keep telling my students is you need to be aware of proportions. And as you can tell, my artist here, the CraneKick, is incredibly excellent at color, at detail, at design. He knows how to make this very much pop in general. A wonderful piece, but you don't really see a likeness. The gentleman in this looks older, more like a politician. That's a little bit of a struggle, so we let him know that, and I'm going to show you how hard this guy has worked to get as far as he's gotten. Here's another image. This is the exact same caricature, but he took it into a took it into a liquefy tool and started warping it, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And as you can see, he's tightened up some of the features. The face is a bit scrawnier on the bottom and maybe a little bigger on the top. He tried to push the proportions a bit more, but still it doesn't quite have the likeness. Now, you may instantly see some of the reasons why that may be the case, but we're not done yet. I'm not going to critique this image, and the reason why I'm not critiquing this image is because he created several completely new images. Here's another one. And as you can tell, the likeness is getting there. It's actually getting there. There's a lot of extra features in here that make it more Zuckerberg, but it still doesn't seem quite right. There still seems to be a disconnect. There still seems to be something that's just not quite there. And I'm going to help you find those things. We're going to look at them together. And the next image that I have here is another one that he did. Now, if we go back and forth between these 2 images, I told him your lines in the center of the face are just as thick as the lines on the outside of the face, and it's causing an awful lot of age. He's like, you're right. So he went through and he removed some of those age lines, and yes, it did youthen up the artwork, but still not the perfect likeness. It's still difficult to tell. There's still some things missing, still some disconnects. What could they be? He sent me even more images. He tried completely removing his outlines, and you gotta admit, if you can do this much awesome work and have it looking like that after outlines, you have colored it up incredibly well, because the caricature is incredibly detailed here without any outlines. It's impressive. Obviously, there's some areas that need those outlines, like how about the pupils of the eyes? Areas that absolutely will have black in there, but I mean, that's incredible. You can tell this guy is excellent at color and design and dynamic and the backgrounds, and so much thought has gone into this, but the likeness is still not quite connecting. So then, before that last image, this was the last image he sent me. Here's the one just a little bit before that, where he sent me all the references of the different images and why he chose them. And I can totally see why he chose a bunch of the images he chose, and why he chose to go the route that he did with this caricature. There is still absolutely nothing wrong with what he created, but I'm about to help him out a little bit. I think we can do something that's really going to help him, push him in the right direction. He's worked so incredibly hard on this. I'm so incredibly proud of him for all of his effort. Now it's time to show him and show you what you can do to improve your artwork and help lock down likeness more. And this is a lot of the simplistic things that you need to understand about caricature before you can move ahead. Let me first off start by changing my canvas size up here a little bit, and it will pixelate by quite a bit, but I'm doing this on purpose because I want to make sure that when I draw on it, it'll be nice and smooth, and this is simply a reference image. So let me zoom out here and scale this up. Like I said, it's going to blur this up pretty intensively. So hang on just a half a second here. One of the things that we're going to begin looking at here, though, is just understanding proportions and understanding how to base proportions off of each other and how to bend rules when you think you need to do exactly one thing, maybe you don't. And so there's going to be a few things that we're going to take a look at here that are going to change this up, change up a couple of the rules, and give a little bit of advice, okay? So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over the top here with some white. And by the way, this is going to be a long video. I am not making any effort to meet the demands that I need to have a video done in 5 minutes, because my students who are actually watching this to learn from it need the full video with all the details. So I do not edit out these moments, and I don't try to keep it under 5 minutes. Go to my other channel and take a look at some of the stuff I do on my other channel. That I will be keeping down to 5 minutes. That's called Legacy Studio, but that also has nothing to do with art. That's more music. And also critique, not critique, but other stuff. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to dim the image a little bit here so we can still see the very obvious references of the face here and see what we can do to begin fixing things. It's a challenge to begin looking at this it's difficult to critique other people's work, okay? You need to understand that first and foremost, because I know how hard he's worked on this, and I know how much effort he's making to really succeed in this. And here's the thing, he did really, really well considering the knowledge that he had. And on top of that, he pushed a lot of great places to push. He covered a lot of the bases that you need to cover. But at the same time, you lose likeness in certain areas because you decide to go so dark on something. Outline doesn't always need to be there. And certainly, as we could tell, he tried to remove the outline. Let's go ahead and start with I'm really trying to hide this face here because I really don't want it to affect what I would do and how I would sketch this face out. But let's go ahead and just for now, make it very, very light. Let me grab my red. Thankfully, that hasn't made anyone too angry that I used red yet. And let's start looking over some of the things that we can make changes on here. And we need to also look at this aesthetically, okay? This is not just about likeness, there's also aesthetic. How do we make this look more attractive? What are some of the things that would have pushed this a little better? The areas that I want to focus on here are the nose, the mouth, and try to figure out how to youth up the eyes a little bit, and then also just some generalized understanding of proportion. Here's the thing. In my caricature lessons that I teach about how to do a proper proportion of the face and understanding how the face lines up and why the face lines up the way it does. I've done a ton of courses on this channel about that. You can take a look at my previous videos on a lot of proportions of the face and things like that, and certainly just go check it out. But a very, very quick synopsis of this is that the ears need to be in alignment with the eyebrows, and the bottom of the ear needs to be lined up with the bottom of the nose. And if the face changes, obviously your ear and nose placement changes it as well, but not to the way that you would expect. If we are trying to do that same feature, we need to keep that in mind in a swoosh form here, kind of like this. Okay, so basically a smiley face, if we take a look at Mark Zuckerberg over here, we need to kind of draw a line kind of like this. And understand that that face is long. There's a depth from here to here, okay? So when you tilt your head down, there's a depth that heads back. So this ear is pretty far back. So he did okay, but I feel like he maybe he took the ears a bit too tall. And sometimes this is where you have to cheat the rules, okay? I feel, as I look at the face, I feel like it's looking straight at us. All right, so if I put a circle or a shape around this face, I feel, for the most part, that that face is looking directly at us. The eyes are not exactly adjusted down. There's not a lot adjusted down for it. Okay, so we can go like that. If we're trying to adjust the face down, then the features do need to do more of this nature. And everything will need to adjust down to make that happen. And things will warp around that line just a little bit more so. Just doing that alone kind of reinvents the shape a little bit, and it will reinvent where some of these lines are going to go. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with adding in all the lines that he added in, but you have to do them very, very carefully. Very carefully. Now, I'm not going to draw out this whole image. I'm just trying to describe how things are going to be affected. When you look at mine here and you look at the initial theories of what I'm creating here, mine kind of feels like it's looking down. There's still a form of the ears kind of going up and still being tall enough where they line up as you would kind of expect here. It's all kind of still following the proper flow. But having this initial structure can really help get you to the final piece, okay? And I feel like when I look at his face that he's drawn, I really feel like his eyes are looking straight at us. His nose might be tilted down a little better. His mouth could be tilted down, but not too much. Not by much at all. So there's a disconnect. And then the ears, which just sit on another line randomly there, if the ears are going to flow down, the eyes need to flow down. The nose, you could get away with that. The mouth needs to flow down too. And it's really hard to explain how that's going to work. Let's take a look at just some of the aesthetics. Because of the lighting in the images that he has, I can see why he drew this line. I don't think that you should draw that in by hand, though. I think that needs to be and I know this guy rocks color and shading. I feel like it needed more shading to demonstrate that feature, and not so much of the, actually using lines. Remember, lines say that there is a absolute change in light and shadow in a key area. Just because I draw a line here on the outside of the ear, that's because everything out here is a completely different color. It's all completely different. If those colors got closer to matching, you wouldn't draw an outline there. And that's the same thing with most of the face that we have going on here. So you can't put a lot of detail into things if the skin is overlapping the skin. Yes, we do draw a lot of outlines to make up a final face, but we have to be very careful what lines we actually grasp for. So if I'm starting to do the drawing, well, let's take a look starting with the nose. We can say that the nose is definitely the right angle. If we look at this nose here and we look at this nose here, there's a very good job on the angle there. Problem being is he drew in these nostril points. And I feel like, just to start, there is not a nostril point on the nose. That is more of an arrowhead. It looks like a very wide heart arrowhead. Kind of like that. Okay? So that needs to be kept in mind. And it's a very key feature on this guy's face. So we need to keep that in mind as we're drawing here. And also exaggerate it. I've taught in my classes that the inside of the eyes has to line up with the outside of the nose. Unless there's a very big area of exaggeration. For the most part, there is a pretty strong extra little bit here on each side of this. So there might be a good reason to exaggerate the nose even wider, but you have to be super careful when you do. Everything has to stay in proportion. Yes, exaggeration is done, but when you exaggerate a feature, it exaggerates everything else around it. So you have to be very careful with how you exaggerate. So yes, this is a good start with this. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this in, and then we're going to go ahead and draw in the bottom of the nose, which is like this. Once again, just trying to follow along with the initial theory. This definitely comes down here, and it's definitely really tight. And I'm going to stop right there. I don't want to do anything else to that for the moment. Now, if the nose is pointing down, that means that the mouth is going to move up into the nose. Okay, since his head is pointing down more, the mouth is naturally going to move up into the nose more. So in my opinion, and now this is, most of my courses are on how Tim would draw things, and then that's up for my students to decide on what route they're going to go. I would not draw the mouth this far down. And here's the way I can tell that. If we look here at the, I hope you can still see the original sketch pretty well. It looks like you can. If you look here, he took this laugh line and he curved it around and brought it down on both sides. Okay? There's a problem there, because if you look at the negative space of Mark Zuckerberg here, there is much more angles going on here. Okay, I've talked a lot about the muzzle of the face and understanding that muzzle of the face. It's a very key thing here. Understanding that muzzle of the face is really going to make all the difference when it comes to this. So I have to make sure that my negative space is very similar to this negative space. Okay? So whatever shape I do needs to come very close to that negative space shape on Mark. So let me undo this here and come back to my drawing, and I'm going to try to replicate, still kind of, and like I've said, I'm trying to utilize the artwork the way that my students have done it. I'm trying to help them improve their art. So I'm not going to draw this how I would draw it. You guys can already see how I would draw it, and I would probably even have more fun with it. But to follow along with how my students do it and try and stick to their design effort, unless they choose to be something different, that's the kind of advice I'm trying to give here. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this down here. Now, another important rule that I've said is that the eyes, 9 times out of 10, are going to line up with the corners of the mouth. And that seems pretty correct. So that's going to be pretty correct. Let's take a look here. Not terrible. I feel like that's pretty compatible. But like I said, I'm going to push that mouth up into the nose more on purpose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I got this shaping right here roughly. Making sure that I've given myself that guideline. I am going to have to turn my canvas sideways, so please don't mind me. I'm better if I draw according to this. And I see why he did this. I see this raise right here, and I see this smirk right here. I see that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to do it exaggerated as well. Okay, so we're going to go like this. And we need to make sure that it's in the center of the nose. And then we're going to go ahead and curl it up, and I feel like there's a little tiny tick right there at the end, okay? So I get exactly why he did that. If you're going to find the little tiny details like that, then you need to make sure you exaggerate the detail of the mouth very, very closely. You really don't want to mess this up. If you're going to get that finite into the exaggeration, then really exaggerate it out. So, and I feel like that's what he started to do, but then he lost the likeness in the rest of the teeth, and I'm going to show you why. This is a pretty big deal. So, once again, I'm going to go ahead and exaggerate that form, and I want to do it into the nose. I want it much closer to the nose. Okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. And just a little twerk up on the end there. Okay? And now, with the bottom of the mouth, there's a very obvious roping U Okay? Kind of like that. Very obvious down form like that. So I'm going to do that as well. And he did do that. Once again, exaggeration is going to be key. So I'm going to over-exaggerate that form. Don't be afraid to over-exaggerate those forms. Okay? Remember, anything that I do with that form, if I'm going to go big like that, I have to make adjustments accordingly to everything else. And I just screwed up. Did I draw all of that on the main drawing? I think I just drew that on the white background. Yep, I sure did. So I'm going to continue to draw on that. No, I'm not. I'm going to erase that with white. Let's see, can I do that? He's not going to let me, man. Oh, no, wait, I'm going to color it with white. There we go. All right. Let me switch back over to my other canvas that I should have been on originally. Hate when I do that. Okay, like I said, this is a very key area where you really don't want to start messing stuff up here, okay? So what we want, just like I just did. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and draw the bottom of the mouth. Now the mouth is definitely coming out towards us, the lip. So I'm not afraid to bring the lip out, unlike my previous video where I was demonstrating how, you know, that Tom Hanks, he had a lip like this, where there was no shadow under there because it was simply the pigment that was demonstrating that he had a lip there. This is obvious. There's shadow going on under this lip. So I'm not afraid to draw that in. I'm not afraid to draw in some kind of a highlight notion or anything like that. I got to remember everything I'm doing, pulling that chin down, I'm going to have to exaggerate it further. If I keep pulling that mouth down, I'm going to have to take the chin down with it. Now, if I take the overall mouth up, I'm going to pull that chin down. That's just a rule of thumb with caricature. So we have this initial design here, and I'm looking at the two outside teeth, and they are sharp little canines. Can you see that? Really sharp little canines on the top, and you can see them really well right here. Okay? And there is a lot of bottom teeth showing here. A lot of it. These are areas, if you're going to get this detailed on the mouth, you have to draw it correctly. If we look at the original drawing, there really is not a lot of detail in those teeth. There's detail in the teeth, and he's obviously colored them and done quite a bit, but those teeth do not look like these teeth. They don't match. There needs to be more time and effort put in the shaping of the teeth before you start shading the teeth. And in my opinion, in many cases, the less is more when it comes to shading. So let's go back to the drawings that I got here. Oops, let's turn off that one. And let's go ahead and try to detail in these teeth. Remember, your negative space is going to be a very key thing as well. Try your best to get the best likeness on those teeth as much as you can, okay? And you don't have to be absolutely perfect, but if there's some jagged looking teeth, then get them in there. That's why 9 times out of 10, if there's someone with like some super jagged teeth, I would almost rather draw them with their mouth shut. Now, there's another thing here that you might be able to see that I'm doing here, and that is I'm drawing the gums with very, very thin lines. Very thin lines. I'm making an effort not to define those gums. If we go look at the original artwork, those lines are a little thicker. Not terrible, but they are a bit thicker. The more black that you put around teeth, the more dirty they become. So less is a whole lot more. Do not detail inside the teeth. Put the black on the outsides of the teeth. And it's kind of hard to explain, but try your best not to cross teeth over each other unless it's an obvious thing. And maybe I can explain it more as we keep going here. The bottom teeth are definitely showing quite a bit. He's got a lot of expression showing in those bottom teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and show a lot of those bottom teeth, and I'm going to create that same smirk out of the bottom teeth that he's showing. But like I'm saying, I'm really taking out a bit of the detail. And if I do have to draw in the gums, I'm drawing them in super light. And I know that you don't see gums on his bottom teeth in his picture, but because I'm dropping that bottom lip so intensely, there's gonna have to be some kind of gums there. So I'm gonna go ahead and take some artistic liberty. But if I color in all of this with black, which is totally okay, there's nothing wrong with doing that. If you're going to exaggerate to make it look right, you have to over-exaggerate. You can't just half-exaggerate. I think we can agree that my smile has that same shape and form and is pushed in the right way. And one thing that's actually helping is the fact that I do not have an upper lip drawn on it. Drawing an upper lip is a difficult thing for a man. If a man does not have a very, very, very obvious upper lip, usually it's best to skip it. And if you do have to put one in there, do it with a single tone and draw it in with that single tone. But be very careful, because men's upper lips immediately can change likeness and can immediately turn them feminine. And you gotta admit, if we look at the original sketch, once again going back here, that's a very feminine looking upper lip that in this situation is a bit unnecessary. This guy worked so hard on this piece. He really did. I know he put a lot of time and effort into this. So you got this really great nose going on here, and very carefully, I mean, I'd say draw. What I would do is I would draw and just do little notes of information as I go down. And if I can replace those with shading after the fact, then I will. Now, I feel like we've really gotten a good direction going on here. And I feel like he's done a really good job on the eyes, except there's some areas, that line right there feels like an age point and is a bit unnecessary. And here's a really key thing. You see how this lid comes all the way back here? This one comes all the way over here. And this comes over top and connects with it. And this one comes over top like that. That's an awful lot of detail. And yes, I truly understand that Mark Zuckerberg has that much detail in his eyes. I know that those bags under the eyes are pretty huge. I get it. Once again, this comes down to aesthetic. What can you do to make the aesthetic look more attractive and still define what makes those features those features? So let's go ahead and try this again and see if we can't help with that. One of the things that I would do, and I'm going to try and draw it his way, I'm going to try and draw it over his, is I have to pay attention to the negative space yet again. Yes, there is a line there, but I can make it much fainter and much smaller. I'm also going to push up on the eye just like he did, and I'm going to keep it all the way through as much as I can, all the way to the other side. I'm going to put the eyelid in there, but I'm going to draw it off the front of the eye. So the eyelid's going to pop up only in the back of the eye. And then, yes, the bag is 100% under the eye. We cannot get away from that. There's no way to get away from that. So the only thing we can do about it is to draw it in, but only draw in so much of it. Okay? Once again, if you continue to put a lot of black around those areas, it over-defines an area. Way over-defines an area. So sometimes calming it down and only doing a certain amount is really going to take it a lot further. Let's go ahead and do it with the other eye here as well. This eye feels like it's really closed and kind of squinty as well. So I can just come in here. And I really do love working with a pencil that's not fully opaque. Or that has a transition setting where I can kind of have fainter lines and build my way up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and actually get rid of that line altogether, and I'm going to build that eye off the same way. Once again, this has to come way up and squeeze in. Okay, it's the little things that will make this work. It's the very little things that will make this work. And once again, we're going to draw the bottom, but only take it so far. Okay? Now, I can see why he took the eyebrows and took them all the way around, but I feel like he over-defined them. If the skin is close to the color of the eyebrow, I would not outline the eyebrows. These eyebrows deserve to be outlined and made like ginormous, okay? And there's many people far worse than me. Don't you judge me. With these eyebrows, though, I would go much fainter on them and much sharper on them. So for me, I would define them in a couple strokes just to start, and then maybe outline it. But maybe just a couple strokes and maybe just a few lines to kind of build the structuring of what those eyebrows are doing, okay? And we definitely have this going on both sides, and there is a raise coming up here, which he definitely saw. So we can define it out like that and then rotate it back. This, in my opinion, this whole tutorial, this whole guide, this whole reworking this artwork comes down to one thing. That's over definition. That's over pushing something. I think the best way to do it is, have you ever gone swimming in a pool? When you get the just the right amount of chlorine in that pool and the right amount of chemicals in that pool, it's wonderful to swim in. It smells nice. It feels nice. It brings memories back. It's not overwhelming. It's fun. But if someone were to dump in 6,000 gallons of chlorine and you're basically swimming in chlorine, something that should be wonderful and enjoyable is just overkill. And technically could kill you. And I think that's kind of the situation we have here. We have such a push of black and outline and such an intensity in so many places that it's overwhelming. I can start to see the likeness here, even on the old face structure. I see more of a likeness with Mark Zuckerberg here than I do in the original sketch. And this is simply practice. Lots of it, but simply practice. And I've seen this guy's work. This guy is a really great artist. He drew a caricature of me and did some crazy things in the background that just were stunning. But he hasn't practiced training his mind to be subtle and to see the likeness quite. And those are the things that we're going to work on for him in the next upcoming lessons and in the next few weeks as he continues to practice on his own. But subtlety, even though a lot of his stuff is very bold and wonderfully bold, subtlety is going to be the key thing that's really going to help him push his likenesses better. Believe it or not, calming it back is going to give him a better likeness than pushing it harder. Now, the over-exaggeration, that's great. Go for the over-exaggeration, go for the big forehead, go for all the stuff he's done here. But there needs to be a bit more control. Another thing that's going to be really key in this caricature is understanding the negative space of the eyes. In the same way that we've done that with the mouth, getting that mouth shape, getting the muzzle of the face, we need to do that same thing with the white of the eyes. How big are the pupils in the eyes? How big are the irises in the eyes? And so looking, there's very little amount of white on this side and not that much white on the other side. And if I'm seeing not a lot of white on the other side, that means that usually the eyelashes are a bit thicker and come more into the corner of the eye, kind of like this, than you would expect. Those are the areas that I fill to try and fix that. And you can see that if I'm to zoom in on Mark here on the actual image, you can see that right here. Right there. I just gave him a bloodshot eye. Sorry, Mark. So I'm sure some days he kind of feels like that. So doing that detail in the corner of the eye is going to be a key thing. If you're going to over-exaggerate, you got to make sure you put in detail, exact detail in very key places. All right, let's take a look at the other eye now. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. This eye is, there's next to no white on that outside of the eye, so I'm going to just go ahead and barely put any there. When I mean barely, I mean barely. Okay, so my eye is going over a lot further than the original eye is. Now I can assume where the pupil's going to be, and I've shown you guys videos on how to line up your pupils. And then since his eyes are so dark for now, I'm just going to go ahead and put in a haze of darkness here. Just so we can kind of have that likeness hopefully show at some point in time. When the likeness truly pops, that's when you start getting excited. Once again here, though, look at how much white I have here in comparison to how much is on this eye. So that means that there is some shading going on here that needs to be put in to properly define it. So just look at where those shadows are and try and build up those things just a little bit at a time. And as you keep going at it, at a certain point in time, things will just start to click. All right. I get why he did the extreme exaggeration this large on the head. If you're going to make the exaggeration that large on the head, and you're going to expand it by that mass, you need to remove it on the opposite side of the face by not that mass, but by a lot. Which then is going to change the overall proportion of the bottom of the face entirely. So if you're going to add that much bulbosity up here, then you're going to have to roughly remove that much down here. Which means that your whole detail of all of this is going to turn into something completely different than what you were drawing. Everything has to be crammed even tighter. Unless you're trying to demonstrate that he has a big brain and you're just trying to demonstrate it as a separate form, a separate idea. Like it's just saying, hey, here's the normal Mark Zuckerberg, and then here's his big head with all of his amazing ideas. That's the only place where you do that exaggeration to that extent. That's not exaggeration, that is distortion. And usually distortion is not a positive thing to have in caricature. Exaggeration is making something larger or smaller and understanding that when you do that, it's affecting everything else in the face. Distortion is simply moving things around, it's excelling some things, and not doing them in proportion with each other, and that is where likeness gets lost. If you are finding you're not getting likeness, but you've drawn every detail properly, then it's probably because you have distorted something and not exaggerated it in accordance to the proportions. Make sense? So that is why, for me, in this situation, and only in this situation, I would calm down on the forehead. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead for now, and chill it out just a little. Though I do like that point at the top. I do think that that's kind of a fun thing. So I'm going to leave that in. Let's take a look at the cheeks. They build off of that. So that's definitely good. There's a bit of a cheek over here. Okay, and that's fine. Now it's going to come down here, and we're going to get this line, which he totally got. That's great. There's that line over here as well. Now we have the side of the face, and we're going to bring that down as well. Okay, this is fine to connect into here. This is going to roughly continue down here, and then we're going to go ahead and build that bottom chin down here. Okay, so we're definitely building up these forms. And I would make some adjustments to my own drawing as I keep going. Because if you're going to put that much information in the head, you're going to squish up a lot of the bottom. Okay, now, the only thing technically that makes his ears look that far out is how his hair is supporting them. So you did cover that. So if we do keep this head shape, which we've simply made more subtle, but we're going to consider this the actual skull of his head. The actual skull of his head is probably somewhere in this ballpark, give or take. Okay? And then the hair is going to sit on top of that. Let me back that up so I don't mess up our initial stuff. So for me to continue this, I'm going to have to drop this whole thing down. So I need you guys to understand that the hair is probably going to go outside of the box that I've been drawing in. Okay? Fair enough? Now we're going to go ahead and decide on the forehead space. I get why you drew these little bumps here, but there are a lot more hairs coming down and weaving around here that can add little tiny bits of detail. And also, think about things in shapes. Here is a shape mass right here as this comes down this way. Okay, so look at these shape masses and build these. Okay, as you see individual shapes, slowly assemble them and build those up a little bit at a time. Look at the shadows and try to understand why it's creating that form. Okay, that's going to be a key thing. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and choose where the forehead's going to be here. He has a lot of forehead, but he's not running out of hair. Okay, he's not aging. So I'm going to go ahead and take the hair out, but I'm going to keep that forehead moderately lower. And I'll exaggerate some proportion on the sides here just a little. Okay. When it comes down to it, this is all about subtlety. And it's so weird to say that. I never actually really thought I would say that when it comes to a caricature, because so many caricatures are beyond exaggerative and absolutely just even downright grotesque. And they're still beautiful, but you still have to be subtle in those grotesque images as well. Beautiful and grotesque, I know, don't go together, but in caricature they do, okay? I'm just saying. Now that we got that general shape here, now you can add your ears, but you need to understand, once again, this number has to go on. All right? And really focus on maybe not putting them up that high. Okay, consider this shape here. Follow the eyebrow until it meets that ear and see if you can create a form that matches that. At what angle do you have to go off those eyebrows to connect to that ear, and as much as possible build that same shape. Okay, and I agree, I'm coming into the same general area that you are with that. Okay, but try, the ears really are not they're not really something to exaggerate as much as you may think. The area to exaggerate would be the nose, the chin, and somehow in the cheeks. I really think that those are the areas of over-exaggeration that need to be focused on. The ears, yes, they're bigger, but with how far back they are, and not to mention that they are in a blur, they're literally dropped into the back. So I would just consider dropping them towards the back. Once again, subtlety. I want that forehead line that is very obvious to see, but it needs to be a subtle feature. Okay. All right, so now, as I'm looking at this, I'm still not quite satisfied with my own sketch. First thing I'm noticing is that my mouth is not centered on the nose. Okay, and these are all little things that you just gotta have to work on a little bit over time. This is why pre-sketching is so important. If you are a digital artist and you can create your concept first, unlike being a live artist and you just have to go, there are two different forms of art. And I know that this guy is trying to focus more on live caricature. On live caricature, you don't get a chance to get it right. You have to do it right the first time, and that's about it. So that just comes with practice. But practice requires you to slow down and not try to go too quick at the start. If you don't understand the principles, no matter how fast you go, you're not going to get any better. If you don't know how to drive a car, putting your foot down on the pedal is not going to help you get from point A to point B properly. Not exactly. Unless point B was planning on death. That's a different story. So it's all about subtlety here. And I know this guy is completely capable of it because I have seen his work. His work is great. His work is absolutely great. I'm struggling a little bit with this, so let's play around with, maybe you're stuck in an area where it just isn't quite feeling quite right. Okay? And if you watch my previous video where I drew Tom Hanks, I fell into slightly the same scenario where I was really struggling to find the likeness, and I do feel like we've got a pretty decent likeness, but it's just not quite on par as I would like it to be. So there's a couple things that we can do to begin to try and focus that attention on better likeness. One, we can do some shading to it. A shading never hurts, especially in the pre-sketch modes. The other thing to keep in mind is I just drew this on top of someone else's drawing, and I'm trying to do it in their style. As soon as I do it in my style, things might get together a little better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another layer here, and I'm going to try and do a little bit of shading to this to see if I can understand where I screwed up in some of these little details. I think I've already found one. First thing I want to do is I want to take this eyebrow here. And I feel like I drew his eyebrow just a bit too small. So let me find that line work here. There we go. Okay. I feel like I drew his eyebrow too small and not close enough to the eye. Remember, we are trying to exaggerate forms. So I'm going to push this eye a bit closer and pull it out just a bit further. Okay. I feel like that might help it just a little. Yeah. Yeah, I think that helped that just a little bit. And honestly, I could go even more, but I'm going to try and compensate for now with a little bit of shading. And I'm just going to do some cross-hatching, just to try and see if I can find where this slip-up is. Okay, and it's just, it needs to be fun. So try and focus on having some fun while you're doing this. If you're not having fun, then you need to take a break. Step back, and this needs to be something that you enjoy. And if you're not enjoying it, then you're thinking too hard about it, unfortunately. And it's so easy to do it, and I do it every day. I do commissions so often, and in the end, I completely wear myself out. Because I said it before and I say it again, folks. Yes, I teach caricature, but there is a real truth to caricature, and that is that you're not always going to get it right. I know some artists who truly do, and who are able to think loosely enough that they don't care if it's not perfect. I know some artists who are absolutely stunning at it and can do this all day long, and every single person they draw, they can. A lot of those guys are not analytical. A lot of those guys don't even care what people think of them. Truth be told, I have met a lot of really amazing caricature artists, and I ask them, why do you do so much better than I do? When I've studied just as hard and I work just as hard on my designs, why on earth do you draw so much better than me? And their answer? They really could not care any less about what people think. And they draw what they want to draw. And whether that's attractive or not, I like to make people look attractive. I want to make sure that they're happy with what they're getting. I want happy clients. They are the opposite. I'm already seeing a better likeness just in some of the shading I'm doing here. Just in that little bit, he just popped. I don't know if you see that now, but in defining the cheek region here and adding that shading to the cheeks, that suddenly is really starting to look like him a lot. Okay? I'm hoping that's clicking with you as much as it's clicking with me. And that's the fun part about caricature, is sometimes you just have to wait for it to click. And when it clicks, it's a good time. I think one thing here is this big area of shadow right there on his cheek is what I was missing. And I can even calm it down a little. If I can remember, I put it on the initial layer, so I got to do this in white. So let me go grab my white here, and I'm going to paint in, or paint out, that. And honestly, as I'm looking at it, I would take those laugh lines out even wider, okay? I'm not going to do that in this video, but looking at how I've done it, I would take the laugh lines out even further. I would probably extend the cheeks out a bit further as well. But for now, I know I'm getting my point across on what to keep an eye out for, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep going with what I have here. Once again, if you're finding you're struggling with your line work, first thing to do is calm your line pressure down. So turn your line pressure down, make your brush smaller, so it forces you to push harder to get that thicker line. And when you can't get that thicker line, you naturally begin to calm down. And that's going to be a really helpful thing. I found that usually my work looks a lot better when my hand gets used to the pressure and gets used to, when I push it my hardest, is the absolute thickest that I want. Where other people will not put as much pressure, they'll make their brush the size they want, and then they'll overpress, and they'll end up making their lines too big across the whole face. You want what we call lots of resolution. As you know well, maybe you don't know, but on your pencil, whichever stylus you're using, whatever tablet you're using, there's a certain amount of pressure points. This one is 512 points of pressure. So there is 512 levels of how hard this is pushing up. Some other ones are upwards of 2,048 points of pressure in that little amount of area. It's ridiculous. And so being able to have as much resolution as possible so that that pressure means something, that pressure means something, pressure means something. That is, I made a hole in my hand. That is what you're trying to do. You want to feel that resolution all the way through. The bigger you make your brush, the more you lose that sensitivity. The more I look at this, the more it's looking like Zuckerberg, and I think one thing that's really going to help is fixing the hair. So I'm going to make my resolution larger. I'm losing my resolution, but I'm doing that on purpose because I'm just going to come in here and quickly dot in some of this hair. I think the instant that we start adding the shadow in the hair, that'll begin bringing him out even more. Okay. These are the little tricks, guys. If you're finding you're not getting likeness, then maybe you're missing some shadow somewhere. Maybe you're missing some detail somewhere. And it's just a matter of time that suddenly he starts to pop out of the woodwork. And I really feel like that's really starting to look like Zuckerberg. There's some work that needs to be done yet, but that gets us further in the direction utilizing the original sketch. Once again, it's an over-exaggeration form. And as I keep looking at this, I would make those ears lower. Right now he looks too much like Spock. So I would go and I would find the ears that I've drawn, and I would be willing to calm them down a little bit. And just a little. If you're absolutely trying to make sure that it looks like he is looking down, then you need to do a lot more work on that front and really adjusting the face looking down. And that's not an easy thing to do. So if you're going to draw it like this, it would be better to cheat the system slightly and draw it with the ears in a very close to proportion with the eyes. I think that helps a lot. That's going to do it for this video, I think. We're at 51 minutes, and I do feel like we've gotten a really good likeness, but you can see what subtlety will do. And it just takes a lot of time and practice. When you were a kid and you picked up your first crayon, you learned fist, press down, and draw like that. When you are... I know a lot of left-handed people seem to push a little harder with their left hand as they write. When it comes to an artist, we have to learn the rule of subtlety. And a great way to do that is to have pen pressure and to learn how to utilize that. That is the ultimate thing. When I became a caricature artist, I made a rule for myself, a goal for myself. There is an amazing artist, an original Disney artist, and his name was Al Hirschfeld. Amazing artist, and knew how to create some of the most unique individuals out of a single line. And the things that he drew were absolutely glorious. And he was known as the Line King. He could do some amazing things with line, and he became the Line King. And I told myself, if I'm going to get into caricature, I'm going to learn how to master the pressures of line. And I want to become the Line King. Not to the extent that he did, where his stuff was so incredibly inorganic but it had movement and gesture in just a single line. I wanted to learn how thickness and opacity made all the difference. And I think that this is part of that point. I think this makes all the difference. There's more that I would do to this, but I know that the likeness is there. I know you guys can see it. I know we're all on the same page. So thank you so much for watching this very long video. I hope it's inspired you to focus on subtlety in your caricature. It's not always about the over-exaggeration. Sometimes it's just about finding the little things, building yourself a roadmap, and finding that success a little bit over time. Thank you so much for watching. By the way, to my awesome student who worked so hard on this awesome piece, his color is incredible. His shading is incredible. He is going to go big places when he gets that subtlety figured out and gets that likeness locked in. And I'm going to be working with him every step of the way to make it there. So I'm proud of you for all the work that you have done and for how far you have already taken yourself, Crane. You've done very, very well. I cannot wait to get you to a point where that likeness is easier to grab. And once you grab it, it's going to give you an even better world in caricature, especially when you choose to go live and you got a caricature that you have to draw in 10 minutes. It's crazy. It's hard. It takes a lot of work to get there. years and years of practice, which I know you are willing to put in on top of what you have already done. We got a long way to go, brother, and you're going to make it. Thank you so much for checking out my video. I will see you guys next time. Don't forget, if you want to become a student and talk directly to me in our live streams, we have room for 5 more people in our Discord right now. Now, every time we do a Discord live, we can only have 10 students, but we can have as many students as we want on Discord. So everyone's very welcome. It only costs $10 a month. Basically, you go into Patreon and you support one of my videos. You only have to support one video at $10 a month. That's it. And come in, take part of the class. I will critique your work, I will support you, and I will lead you through it so that you can find your success if you love caricature. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.